when you're a system thinker, when you kind of reduce emotion, which is one of the challenges in being married and things like that, but resort more to logic, you know that 99.999% of kids will not make the NHL. So when you're going in and you think you got a shot and you're trying out for these WHL teams and you're the captain of the big team and you think you're at the top of the game, you go back to the 99.999, and the same goes for football and baseball and every other sport. I mean, to make it to the very top, there's only a handful. There's 30 teams and there's 20 people on each team. Give it the the odds of me making it were just astronomical, like the same as winning the lottery and getting hit by lightning as you're on the way to pick up the check.
Jay, good morning. Great seeing you again. So you have been on Channel Journeys 6 times. I went back and checked. This is your first time on Bold Journey, so welcome to the new show.
I love it. I think back to that SNL skit where you get a robe after the 5th time or something like that, and now we're starting a new journey, maybe to get a new robe.
Exactly, a new colored robe. Exactly. Well, a lot of folks know you, Jay, as the penultimate channel analyst. You share a ton of great data, and I found out you share a lot about your personal life too on your blog that we were just chatting about, and it's really great the way that you've set that up. And maybe we can just start there. I want to talk about kind of the journey that you've been on in your life, and let's go way back and talk about your childhood. It was fun reading that you were born in Edmonton, I think, and your dad was working for an oil company, which is kind of touches home for me. I got my start in the business on the oil side, and then you moved to Alberta early on. Talk about those early years and kind of how that formed you.
Yeah, my parents and my older sister, 4 years older than I, was born in Manitoba. My mom grew up on a farm. My dad's parents were entrepreneurs and ran the local lumber and hardware store in town. My dad, went to college to be an accountant, found a job in Edmonton. It would have been a 12-hour drive away, 2 big provinces over from Manitoba. So I was born in Edmonton. I was kind of the first of the family, first of the grandkids, kind of born outside of the farm type of idea. But I would tell people that, as a Canadian, by law, you have to follow hockey. And I was blessed to grow up in a place that had Wayne Gretzky on your home team. And between Edmonton and then moving to Calgary later on when I was 10, I had 8 Stanley Cups in a row. So that's, like kind of having 8 Super Bowls or 8 World Series, in a row and winning 6 of them.
Wow.
So that was my story going up. To fast forward to today, living in Florida, we've had 6 Stanley Cups in a row. Of which between Tampa Bay and the Florida Panthers, they've won 4 of them. So I've had a blessed life, I think, when it comes to Stanley Cups.
No kidding. It always amazed me when I lived in Florida, how many folks I met who traveled or relocated, I should say, to Florida, who played hockey.
Yeah, we have a great group of Northeastern from New York, New Jersey, up obviously to Boston, a ton of Canadians, expats down here. And so you'd think, how do you play hockey in a place that ice doesn't, and the funny thing is with that many people from the Northeast and Canada, there's a ice rink, every 10 minutes down the road down here, probably better than any place I lived.
That's amazing. Are you still playing?
I do. I play once a week. I play football every Sunday morning. I play hockey. I'll play tonight at 10:30 at night.
Wow.
Or get home, like last night was a late one coming home from Dallas, and tonight will be a late one coming home from hockey, and I'll have to maybe get 2 or 3 hours sleep tonight to get to New York City for another speech tomorrow.
Which is, you were probably lucky to get 2 or 3 hours last night.
That's it. What do they say? You'll sleep when you're dead.
Yeah. Way to go. So on your blog, you talk about these pivotal moments of your life. Take us through, what were some of the biggest ones, do you think, the biggest pivotal moments?
Yeah, I think I lived a little bit of a storybook childhood. I only have like the best of memories. My parents ended up getting divorced, but they waited till I was well into college. And I ended up getting divorced at the same time for my first years. But from a childhood perspective, like looking forward to Christmas and opening the best presents and having them drive me to hockey every morning at 5 a.m. and coming to watch football and track and field after. And I tried to dig up, any negative memories, and we conversion van with the tent trailer. And I had visited most states growing up as a Canadian. We'd just choose Tijuana and drive down one way, drive over one state, drive back, drive to Texas, drive over one state, drive up, drive to Louisiana, go over one state. So I had visited most of the contiguous, 48 states by the time I was in college. Just great kind of, childhood that way. One of the most
Hmm.
pivotal, my mom was a computer teacher. And this was, in the late 70s, early
Mm.
80s, first Apple II. And nobody could afford a computer back then. So my mom, and she might be, 5'2" and just a small person, but she would lug home this, 50-pound computer, 50-pound monitor, 50-pound printer, put it in her little Honda, and she put it home for me to use and learn. And I might have been, 10 years old programming computers. And again, very, early days.
And it's self-taught, I bet. You just figured out a way to do it?
And one of my memories was, there was games back then. I mean, you could play, you could die of dysentery. You could play Logo, and there's things on the Apple that, you could
Hmm.
do games. And I was more interested in basic. I built my own Quicken program to track my money when I got my first job at 11 or 10 years old, delivering flyers. I
And
made a
that played a Jay, that fascinated me because that plays a really big role in what happens next, in the coming 5, 10 years.
It did, and it was a bigger role, and I think, that was maybe my plan that my mom had, and I'm not sure, but it wasn't just to play games. It was, hey, what is this if, then, and else loops, and how could I go and build something that, if I made $1 and I'm going to go spend it at 7-Eleven, and I'm, 10 years old, so I'm buying a Slurpee and hockey cards, and I go home and track, it's 7-Eleven and Slurpee and hockey cards. I have it all categorized in history. And there was no Quicken back then or Microsoft Money, but there was this idea as a very young kid that there's got to be a system to this, a way to track, a way to report on it at the end of the year. I made a few $1,000s during the year delivering these flyers, and look what I have for it. Nothing. I have, a couple of cavities from Slurpees and
Yeah.
a good set of hockey cards.
Did you have a paper route too, Jay?
I did have a paper route after the flyers.
Yeah.
And moved through I pumped gas. I did all the things that kids do. And again, it went back to this spreadsheet. Microsoft Money didn't come out for another 5 years. And I was able to convert it all into a real program then. But
Yeah.
then though, it was like, hey, I made a few thousand. What if I make it a few thousand more? It led to another big story, buying my first motorcycle after watching Top Gun as
I
like a
love that.
15-year-old. And I had to make $4,000 to buy that motorcycle from the movie. And that was pivotal too, because that was the last drink I ever took. Not because I didn't like drinking. I didn't really like drinking, but it was financial. At
You
the
just
time.
said I can save so much more money and use it more effectively.
Yeah. Well, I went to a program, and here's system thinking again. Is now I'm 15 years old. I'm pumping gas. I have these other odd jobs and doing whatever. I looked at my computer. I'm like, I'm making $8,000 a year. What do you do with that? And if I didn't drink, if I didn't smoke, and if I didn't, do all the things, in 6 months on my birthday, I could buy this wonderful motorcycle that Tom Cruise is driving. And if you remember that scene, he pops a wheelie and there's
Yeah.
takes off behind him, and he's going to get the girl. And you can imagine a hormone-filled kid, watching this, looking at his computer saying, I could, and, I phoned, there's no internet back then, but so I phoned the local motorcycle dealer and said, hey, have you guys seen Top Gun? They're like, of course we've seen Top Gun. And I'm like, what's that bike? And he's like, wow, it's a Ninja 900 EX. There's no way you can afford it, kid. And I'm like, well, try me. How much? And the guy's like, $4,000. I said, hold that thought. I'll see you in 6 months.
I'll be back.
I'll be back. There was another movie from that time. I'll be back. That was it. That was the system thinking to say,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, this is the changes I'm going to have to make in my life as a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
And this is what I could do. And I accomplished that goal. And I remember riding into school, and I had the aviators, and I took off my helmet a block away from school, and I rode in just like he did in the
Hair
movie.
flying in the wind and
Hair flying in the wind, and the mullet
Yeah.
behind, flying in the wind. And that was like one of those moments, like, oh my goodness, like the computer told me, because of all this tracking, and I couldn't buy hockey cards anymore, no more Slurpees for 6 months, but, no more wasting kind of money on all these other things.
Yeah.
If I really want this particular goal, I think that was probably a highlight back then of linking, 10 years old to 15 years old and being able to do that.
Not many kids are mature enough to make that link, I think. I had all those jobs that you're describing, but I spent them. I found ways to spend it on baseball cards, skiing, Slurpees, whatever.
That's right. Well, I think one of the things, on my dad's side, you talked about childhood and getting formed. So my dad was the true accountant.
Yeah.
And back then, again, not really, he wasn't using the computer that my mom brought home because I was
Hmm.
using it. So he had the huge general ledger book for our family. And so when we're planning that vacation, that trip with the tent trailer down into the
Yeah.
US, when he's looking at the food bills this month and everything else, and, they grew up and were challenged.
Yeah.
They lived in a mobile home, as he went to college. My mom used to talk about, buying all kinds of potatoes and rice to be able to eat during the entire month and stuff like that. He had the big accounting book, and I remember the debits and credits. And he would, once a week set up the
Yeah.
family finances. He was the guy, the rich dad, poor dad. You read the book,
Yeah.
and if you put away $10 a week into a
Yep.
interest-bearing account, you're going to be a millionaire. And he's the guy that did that. And that was the other side, is the system thinking that goes underneath
Hmm.
that. I remember, again, when I bought the motorcycle, going into the bank, and there was a big poster. It was a little credit union, but a big poster for a small kid walking in.
Hmm.
It said, "Do you want to be a millionaire?" I'm like, "Oh my God, millionaire! I can't even fathom what a
Yeah.
millionaire is." And so I went, and I must have stood there for 30 minutes reading the small print over and over and over again. But it was just as simple back then, $50 a month into an interest. And back then, interest rates in the bank were like
Yeah.
10%. An easier calculation. If you could put in $50 a month starting today, if you're 18 years old, you're going to be a millionaire. My goodness, I'm only 15,
I
buying this
can.
motorcycle. So the day after I bought the motorcycle, I started putting $50 a month, and I'm only 15 now. So I'm going to be more than a millionaire. I got that extra 3 years of compounding.
Yeah.
And then I learned that, maybe I shouldn't put it in a bank account. Maybe I should have it out in mutual funds and equity accounts.
Yep.
Went with my dad when we were a teenager to, the biggest trader in Canada. He used to have like sessions, and we'd go in there and listen to him, and he was legendary. But I remember putting $50 a month, and then I had a computer program that said, what if I put $100 a month?
Yeah.
What if I put 150 a month? Then when I, started working at IBM, it's like, what if I put $1,000 a month? Then that started changing everything. Like, I could own a big sailboat. I could, do these things. Like, what if I could retire at $10 million?
Yeah.
What would it take? And I got to think back to teenager. What would I have to do every month till I'm 65 to go do that?
Yeah.
And again, that was another one of the containers in my life. And it's another blog, which is this retirement plan, is to own that sailboat, brand new, is to sail across the blue ocean, is to retire with that kind of money, to drive a Ferrari and do, things and play
Yeah.
hockey 90. And it was one of these forward-looking things. If I project it, the old books like The Secret and stuff, if you put
Yeah.
it out in the
Yeah.
universe,
Yep.
it'll be happening, because your brain every day is going to kind of relate to where you want to go. And there's all kinds of books about that, but I remember The Secret so well. But that was it. That was the story, which is, if I put these 5 big, hairy plans out there in the universe
Yeah.
and track my way day by day on, computer programs to track my way, maybe that could happen.
Well, and you tell the story in your blog of building your first house. I think at 22, you're building your first house, and kids today, they hope they can get a house by the time they're 40, let alone
Yeah.
22. A great journey, but it wasn't always smooth sailing along the way. I want to dive into some of the more difficult moments that you had, the ones that really challenged you. And you mentioned some of those, getting divorced, for example. What were some of the biggest, and you couldn't play in the NHL that you were kind of dreaming about? Go back to some of those, really tough moments of adversity and how you got through those.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because it's another thread through my life is, there's no person in the world that doesn't go through adversity and challenges. And I think of some people, especially given literally today, that the challenges they're going through, putting food on the table. I think of my millennial aged children who've done everything right, but still, can't buy that home that I was able to buy.
Right.
And, the one thing that keeps knocking at you every day is this sense of privilege. When you were born, how you were born, who you were born to, what country you were born in. And, I don't like autobiographies all that much that don't attribute at least 50% of your life to luck.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to personalize success too much, without thinking about, even if everybody does go through these challenges, the challenges are less for, significant parts of the population.
Yeah.
Your gender, your religion, your
Your parents, it
makeup,
varies so much.
the way you look, obviously, the
Yeah.
color of your skin. There's just so much that goes into it that weighs heavy on you as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
And, I can't start any story of, challenges and adversity. And most of the challenges I got through because they were kind of given to me a little bit on a silver platter.
Yeah.
They were ones that you had to face, and we all face, grandparents passing away, and we all face issues. But when you're a system thinker, when you kind of reduce emotion, which is one of the challenges in being married and things like that, but
Hmm.
resort more to logic, you know that 99.999% of kids will not make the NHL. So when you're going in and you think you got a shot and you're trying out for these WHL teams and you're the captain of the big team and you think you're at the top of the game, you go
Hmm.
back to the well, no, 99.999, and the same goes for football and baseball and soccer
Yeah.
and every other sport. I mean, to make it to the very top, there's only a handful. There's 30 teams and there's, 20 people on each teams. Give it the odds of me making it were just astronomical, like the same as winning the lottery and, getting hit by lightning as you're on the way to pick up the check.
Yeah.
So that was easier to dial down that disappointment. Getting divorced was crushing. But again, at that point, over 50% of people, and when I went to my kids, who I was most concerned about, over 50% of their classes were divorced. So there was no
Hmm.
Mother's Day and Father's Day and, write cards for both your parents anymore. The teachers knew that half the class were in these, kind of different situations.
Yeah.
So again, it was a little bit of a challenge, but put on a silver platter that, literally half the people have gone through this. Nothing's really unique in your circumstances. It's
Hmm.
happened millions of times before. So before you go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to contest it with a lawyer, just understand that, it's been contested millions of times before. And the only people who win in that scenario are lawyers who my oldest daughter's a lawyer who can collect the funds as you're contesting something that the precedent's been set a million times over.
Yeah.
So when you understand systems and you go into something like a divorce, which is one of the most emotional things you'll go into, you understand that almost to the seventh decimal point, how this thing's going to turn out.
Hmm.
So in the end, when you just start there and start thinking about the kids and start thinking about how it's all going to work and forget about all the precedents before, it just makes challenges so much easier.
Jay, I should have known that you would approach it that way. Being such an analytical guy, that you would look at what really were my odds of making the professional hockey team, or what are the statistics on divorce. That doesn't make divorce any easier per se, but to how you cope with it, I think. You
Yeah.
had
So
already
that's,
given up drinking for financial reasons, so you weren't going to turn to drinking the problem away. So it was I think, a pretty healthy approach. Was it still challenging emotionally, even with that approach?
I mean, it was. I mean, it was kind of very depressing. It was, and other story like I failed in a startup, and I've had all kinds of stories, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to dwell on them because 71% of tech companies fail in the first 10 years.
Hmm. Yeah.
50% of Fortune 500 companies fail over 20 years.
Yeah.
So now I'm looking at this, and I failed, year 6 or year 7 after raising $10 million. But I was one of 71% of founders.
Yeah.
And they would then go and say they successfully exited and now they're on to the next thing. But I made a bigger deal of it. I didn't successfully exit that company that we built. That name is no longer in existence. The website is no longer live.
Was that
And that
Channelize?
channelize. And the
Yeah.
technology itself was 10 years ahead of this agentic AI and
Yeah.
everything about now. And the timing was wrong. And we made so many mistakes, but I could systemize what those were. Again, the founder mistakes that, I remember one of my co-founders telling me, when we're doing the legal documents, I'm just a happy Canadian, but he's like, Jay, we're friends until we're not. And that stuck with me. And I say it almost every other day when I'm thinking about these things is you're always in these business relationships, but you can be in
Hmm.
all relationships, like partnering, for example.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're friends until you're not. And the not might not be under your control. So in the end, I was thinking about that, but I was thinking about the 71% failure rate, and I didn't make the 30% that made it through the 10 years. Not to say those 30% went off and were billionaires
Hmm.
and just run lifestyle businesses and it pays the mortgage and things like that. And they're going sideways for 20 or 30 years in a business, but that's what they, chose to do.
Yeah.
But I pretty much approach all adversity and all challenges, not in the rearview mirror, but I project forward.
Hmm.
So if you kind of read the blog, you'll see that every part of my life sits in a container. And, the containers, and they can be physical things like just the cars and boats or whatever out front. And, last week I had a check engine light on our SUV. and I just have no time. So, I can't just take it to the dealer and stuff like
Yeah.
that. My wife had a health issue, so I ended up canceling a couple of speeches. And I had a day wide open. Like, where in the week do you get a day that, you can just run errands? So it was like one of those, I went and got it fixed. It was 800 and whatever dollars. And it didn't matter. It was just like check the box. So now when you start the car, there's no check engine light. So it's simple things like that. That container is now sealed until
Hmm.
something else breaks. When you
Yeah.
drive cars and boats and things break, every time you take them out. But then you move around this idea. It's like, are my containers sealed as best as possible?
Hmm.
But where can I predict forward? So studying, I'll just stay on cars. I mean, I study where is this car? I buy them exactly the day they come off warranty. I know the exact 50% that the value's dropped. I joke with people that I buy Mercedes and BMWs for the price of a Honda Civic because I study the market deeply. The
Hmm.
365 cars, the exact depreciation curves. I'm on Auto Trader every day studying where mileage days are. So I have the perfect day to buy the car.
Yeah.
And then this idea of how many years can I then drive it until it starts having more problems, costs more money to keep on the road than
Yeah.
benefit of going new. So I have this whole plan set up, and part of, the retirement funds is taking the $49,000 the average American buys on a car now and buy it for 20 something thousand, banking
Hmm.
that into a future sailboat.
Right. Right. For that
Just every
catamaran.
container has a future view to it.
Yeah.
But when adversity comes, if you're fired from your job, which I've been fired, a few times,
Yeah. You talk about that in your blog.
you're always predicting, though.
Yeah.
You got a chance to get laid off. You get a chance to be fired. You get a chance to whatever happens. You've already played it out, the scenarios.
Yeah.
One of the things that takes the emotion down pretty quickly is when something happens, there's not the shock, anger, resentment, the Sarah curve, acceptance and help. The traditional Sarah curve, because you've already played out the game.
Hmm.
Every container. I just got my motorcycle stolen a couple of weeks ago. Well, Jay, you must be crushed. Well, I'm like, well, no, because I had insurance and I'd already played out the system. Work with the police. The police aren't going to care. They only recover 14% of motorcycles in Miami. So I knew there was an 86% chance I'm buying a new motorcycle. And I did, a few days ago. But now when I park at the airport, last night I parked a little differently. So I'm testing out a new theory.
Yeah.
It's just this, you've got a million things going on, but if you can containerize them, and make sure the container stays, somewhat sealed from an emotional perspective. You don't get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You don't get emotional about things. You don't feel like the world's crushing you because you just move around and make sure you're doing the right things. And in these containers, you're predicting what could happen.
Yeah. It sounds, Jay, like you have a resilience that you've developed through analytics and planning and anticipation of what could happen and being realistic about it.
Yeah. And it's called systems thinking. If you kind of dive into the science of it,
Hmm.
if you're sending somebody to the moon, if you're, doing a big project, there's
Yeah.
always the idea of contingency planning and what is every possible scenario. But you're not going to plan for something that's a lightning strike. But you know that there's a 3% chance of some edge case happening. Some, black swan event happened, like a pandemic or something.
Yeah.
You couldn't plan for it, but you also had it in your percentages.
Right.
Though this truly is this over here. You wouldn't plan for instability in your country, or you wouldn't plan for civil war and stuff like that. But those percentages, might be near zero. And then sometimes it might be near 1%.
Hmm.
So you're watching and not getting consumed with the daily political thing, but you're also thinking, what, for my family and for the safety of my extended family, what would be the plan if that 1% happened?
Hmm. Right. So, I think about resilience and grit, and are you born with it? Do you develop it? What do you think? Because I think a lot of this you've developed over time, but it started at a very young age for you.
Yeah. Well, I think the way my brain is wired,
Yeah.
so much of this is Freudian, and it goes back to your, development. And if my dad has a general ledger and my mom is hauling a 50-pound computer home every day in the trunk of her car,
Yeah.
I was given the tools. On top of all the blessings I was given and the privilege that I was given, I was also then given the tools.
Yeah.
What a ridiculous set of technology tools and other things that I was given. And my dad wasn't given the technology tools on top of his system thinking. And I go back to his father, and he died in 1985 when I was 13. And two things, one story is that I used to sit in his chair, and he had retired at like 50 years old or less than 50, built a cottage on a lake, just beautiful, had his life to sit. But his library that he had set up with books, like over my shoulder by this chair, every single book was how to. Like how to build a nuclear submarine. How does this work? How does this work? How does this work? It was a single book. It was basically a physical version of Wikipedia.
Yeah.
There was a page, on everything, and everything you could look at, from biology to chemistry to physics. There was books on every subject.
Yeah.
And they were almost children's books. Like it wasn't, big, doctorate thesis on, kinetic energy or something. But it was like a kid's book on how does kinetic energy work. And you're reading like big print and you get through the book in like 30 pages. But this idea of having that knowledge, like the 80% of knowledge on everything was, passed down from him. And I always thought like he died in 85, 10 years before the internet. Boy, if he ever had access to, to Wikipedia, I mean, we would get him out of the house. Like this would have been the biggest thing for him. But the second story on my grandfather is he got prostate cancer in 1985. It was still, it was treatable. And, in most cases, still at a 95+% back then.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided not to fight it. And he died of prostate cancer. And then that was at 64 years old. Like, talked about retiring before 50. He didn't have much retirement. And so my dad got prostate cancer at 64, same age, and fought it, to the nuclear beads and did everything and beat it, which, now 98% or 99% of men beat it. And so I, when I turned 50, got really serious about prostate cancer and my PSA levels, and I got in MRIs and CAT scans, and I did the whole gamut of baseline testing, working with a really good doctor.
Yeah.
And starting at 50, we're watching my prostate every single year, exactly where. And I'm pretty much predetermined to get it at 64. But years before that, we're not going to wait till it becomes, level 3, level 4. We're going to start when it hits level 1. And so it's this, system thinking. My grandfather, that happened. My dad, that happened. But this is coming. That's one of the containers, your health, your personal health.
Yeah.
You open up your personal health, and that's one of those things that's lagging. I was one of the first people to do 23andMe, the DNA testing, when it came out. I think it was one of the first, couple thousand people. When that
any
DNA
surprises when you did that?
Well, it's huge surprises. I loved it because on one side, there's a 6,000 ways you were going to die. You've got a high chance against psoriasis. You've got a high chance of getting macular degeneration. You got to here's what's built into your DNA. You've got this coming. Like my mother had macular degeneration and things like that. But here's the things. And prostate cancer was right up there. My other grandfather died of heart disease on top of diabetes. Those were actually higher for me. So it plugs into your brain again. It's like, I make watch sugar. I have to watch my diet. I, can't become obese because that's going to happen. So that was one thing. The other thing was, the history of your family. I've had system thinkers on both sides of my family, which are really good at genealogy, because how and where do you come from? Where does your family lineage go? Those people at ancestry.com that are pulling your family tree back to 1100 or 1200.
Right.
Knew the battle that we lost in 1124 in Scotland, in Inverness, Scotland, that jettisoned my family. Either they were, going to be executed or had to leave to Ireland. Life in Ireland wasn't good, especially for foreigners. So the first chance you had to come to the United States or Canada, they took. They came to Canada. So they settled in Valcourt, Quebec, and they set up a militia in Quebec, which became, to this day, it's a Canadian Air Force site, which was set up by, my original settlers that had lost that battle in 1124. And by,
do you know what year they came to Canada, Jay?
Yeah, it was hundreds and hundreds. Like they were kind of in the 1700s, 1800s.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago. It was this, watching that, right, and going to the McBain family, taking my kids to the family park on that part of Inverness, Scotland, which was which was a specific area that the clans all got together, and where we were. McBain, it was McBaithin, it was much different back then, but it was Lake Loch Ness, famous for the Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
And my mom's whole lineage back to like 1200 was a place called Nottinghamshire, England, famous for the Sherwood Forest and Robin.
Yeah.
So I
very
tell
fun.
people, the fun fact you have to come up with when you're in a group environment.
Right.
Come up with a fun fact. I'm descended from Robin Hood and the Loch Ness Monster.
That explains it all, Jay.
But that's, if I go into ancestry.com, I've done my job of plumbing my generation all the way back to 1200. It's all
Yeah.
built for the next person. My kids and my grandkids can just go in and fill in the next block.
Yeah.
But once they connect to that family tree, they're good all the way back to 1200.
Yeah. Very fun. That's really cool. Jay, you talk about in your blog that Christmas is a really special time for you. Are you a religious person? Is faith play a role in any of this?
I'm actually not. Christmas was more about the family and
Family celebration and
celebration, and it's the time you family. My dad and stepmom are coming after Christmas. Last Christmas, we went up to my mom's place in Canada, and the kids got to ski and stuff. But it's the time where at work you totally disconnect at the same time every year. It's not like booking your family summer vacation. It's locked in every year, and right around mid-December, people stop working the same way. Whether it's December 18th or 17th, wherever that Friday lands. From that day past the new year, I mean, I don't do much at all. And so as always, I have pictures every year at Christmas and always opening, might have been a new computer or whatever, the big present year. There was so much anticipation that went into that. But my wife is Catholic. We go to church, every week. Kids went through their first communion and everything else. So promoting, obviously, for that, but I'm not.
Yeah. But you're raising your kids in the Catholic faith.
Because my wife, that's her.
Because it's important to Michelle.
Her strong belief, and in her family, that's obviously strong beliefs. And whatever, if she was Jewish, if she was Muslim, it didn't matter. I mean, that was her beliefs. Let the kids grow up in that. But my older kids are not religious at all.
Yeah. Well, I know family is very important to you. It's obvious the way you post, and the things you post about and all the travel that you do. Adventure plays a big role. Would you say you grew up as an adventurous kid? You talk about your parents taking you on road trips to Tijuana. It sounds like that was infused in you, this idea of travel.
It was. And Michelle, my wife, is the same way. I mean, she wasn't grown up that way. Like, her family wasn't travelers, but she became one.
Yeah.
And that we linked up. The first time we ever sat down and talked, I was bragging to her about my rollerblades and Red Bull tour.
You got to tell us about that one. That's a great one.
Here's a system thinker. You quickly go to the internet, you go to the United Nations. There's 193 countries on Earth. So I set up a blog to say, I'm going to go visit 100 countries, and I'm going to call this. And I went on one trip, and I went to Germany, and I ended up rollerblading through, the 3 cities in Germany. But then I went to Amsterdam, then I went to Luxembourg, then I went to Brussels, Belgium, then I went to France. So I touched every country that touched Germany. I rented a car, and just between rollerblades and Red Bull, I rollerbladed every city. And I drove to the next, country. And I ended up doing 14 countries in 8 days.
And rollerblading in every one of them.
And rollerblading every city. So I rollerbladed from, Amsterdam. I rollerbladed all through these major cities in Italy and Switzerland and up through Slovenia and Slovakia. But I ended up in Auschwitz. And this was another system part of my life is one day I was in Washington, D.C., I think giving a speech for Lenovo or something. And I had an off day. So I was going to go to the Smithsonian as a Canadian, go do the whole mall and do the whole tour. And, I was walking by and I saw the Holocaust Museum as I was walking to the Smithsonian. I'm like, well, why don't I go burn an hour there? And then I'll spend the afternoon at the Smithsonian and then come home, go back to the hotel. And the hour turned into 8 hours.
Yeah, you can't burn an hour in a Holocaust museum.
And you're given a little card of a person and you find out what happened to that person at the end, and plot twist, everybody died.
Yeah.
But I was on the front steps, just, like a changed person.
Yeah.
After that emotion. And I made a promise to myself, I'm going to make it to Auschwitz, to touch those railroad tracks, to walk through the system there. And that's what the main part of the trip was, even though I started at Amsterdam and came around the 14 countries this way. But then I went to the library, or I went to the bookstore in Poland, and I bought like 6 books on the World War II. And I actually tracked almost on rollerblades from Auschwitz back to Berlin, the bunker in Berlin. And I tracked every mile and what happened exactly in those miles. And my immersion in World War II history was not in college, was not in high school. It was there and rollerblading every step. So that, 14 countries. So I was bragging to her that, I'm on this 100 country tour, rollerblades and Red Bull. And I was saying, last week I was in Brazil watching the World Cup on Rio de Janeiro on the beach, 1 million people on the beach watching the World Cup.
Yeah.
And then I went to Argentina the next day and watched them. And this is where presidents lose elections down there. If their team loses, that's how important soccer is in those places. And she was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Last week I was in South Africa in that stadium. So she was at the World Cup with the Vuvuzela in the stadium. And here I am bragging that I was in Brazil watching the game.
Watching
on
it. TV. Wow.
So that was the trigger to our relationship, is this love for travel. And that 100 countries I just hit last year, we did a 7-country Africa trip.
Yeah.
Ascar was my 100th country. And now we're at 103. And in 2 weeks, we're heading off to Ecuador and the Galapagos Islands.
Wow. That'll be awesome. I just love that. What you're sharing with your kids, for them to see all these different countries and cultures is so cool.
Then for my, I feel bad. My older kids, we didn't have the money to, do all these things, but we do a lot of travel like Disneyland, Disney World and stuff like that. But the younger kids, I mean, they've been to now like 65 countries, but they're checking off like going to the Antarctica on a cruise and then, going to these Africa safaris and being in, every continent. They've seen every world wonder. And when Thanksgiving comes, other people have turkey. We go to the Galapagos and swim with turtles.
An amazing experience. Wow. I love the video of you proposing to Michelle at 10,000 feet. Now, I got to ask you, Jay, I saw the video. Michelle is skydiving. Did you actually jump out of the plane too?
Yeah, we both have videos on YouTube. So both the people you jump with have the GoPro on their wrist.
Yep.
So you could actually watch the proposal from both sides. The interesting thing, it was my 40th birthday. And for a celebration of my 40th birthday, she took us skydiving, and she's afraid of heights. So it was a big thing for her. And I'm like, oh yeah, you got to check that box. And again, I'm risk averse, so I'm not going to skydive twice. But you want to check the box once, right? So this was perfect. And I'm thinking, what a perfect scenario. So I went and bought a ring to propose and didn't tell her. And I went and told the pilot, and when I told the guys behind the scenes, when we're up at 10,000 feet, before we jump out of the plane, I want to get on one knee and do this. And you got the GoPros going on both sides. And she was like, she had wrote a will, like she's afraid of heights. Like she was panicked to do this, but it was really for me.
Yeah.
But anyway, I got down on one knee and I started saying these loving things in a speech.
Yeah.
And he thought I was like giving her final blessing or something, like, she's going to die and I'm, just consoling her that she's going to die. And it's not till she kind of looked down and saw the ring that she figured out what was going on, because the door was almost open at that point, getting pushed out of the airplane. And I remember like her goggles that she was wearing started to fill up with tears halfway up the goggles. But it just became like, then the guy that was with me is like, the ring was too loose. And he's like, just turn it around. He's Australian. Like, turn it around and hold it. She's like, I'm not losing my ring. But she had to give it back. She
thought you were giving like the final rites or something.
That's what she thought it was. But anyway, we gave the ring to the pilot and she jumped out, and then I jumped out after her. We met on the ground. That's on the video. She tackled me on the ground. And then we're watching this plane, come around, to land, 15 minutes later, circling to land. Ring was on that plane, so she wasn't in sight of that pilot.
Don't lose that plane. Oh, fantastic stories, Jay. All right, I want to shift gears. I'm going to do a quick round of rapid fire with you. So these are, if you can, no overthinking, one word, bold, one word answers. All right, you ready?
Goodness. Okay. I'm an analyst. I don't use one word answers.
I know. This is really going to challenge you, Jay. One word that describes you in a storm of life.
Protected.
What's one failure that taught you the most?
Divorce.
What's your morning routine in one word?
Sleep in.
I thought you were going to say coffee. What's one value you won't compromise on?
Trust. And
what are you looking forward to the most in retirement?
Adventure.
There you go. I thought it was either going to be adventure or catamaran.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that links to, so many when you're at 100 countries, so many of the other 93 countries even fall into two categories. They're either unsafe. They're red in really bad war zones in the Middle East and in Africa right now. If you look at my world map, most of them are in that red zone that you would never take because you'd be kidnapped or murdered.
Yeah.
The other half of the remaining countries sit in small islands in the Pacific. We're going to go to Australia again next year and try to hit 10 new countries around there. But we went to like Vanuatu and stuff. But when you're in those like northern of Australia, there's like 10 sovereign countries, waving United Nations countries that are just small islands. And the only way you can get to them are on these milk runs, these little propeller jets, and you got to fly with the mail. Yeah. So there's all these groups that have been to 193 countries, 193 passport stamps, and they talk about all these small little islands. Part of the adventure is, could you hit 193 countries, but on a catamaran? It's like just doing the Caribbean.
Yeah.
You dot all these. We just went on a Disney cruise through the Caribbean, but every single one, a lot of them are, kind of owned by Denmark or the UK or like that. But
Yeah.
there's still sovereign countries in the Caribbean that you can make yourself to, and it's a new country. And part of the adventure on a catamaran is you just point to where the wind will take you. And now the catamaran we're looking at will be electric as well. So if there is no
hmm
wind, it'll be like a Tesla on a
Yeah.
catamaran. And we're going to point to these places we've never been.
Yeah. A great way to get there. Yeah. And that technology is advancing so quickly. So it'll
It is.
definitely
And
be
then
ready.
if you've got a 10-year plan, you watch these electric drives and you watch
Yeah.
stage one, you're on the subreddits from the sailors that are going around the world right now on electric,
Yeah.
what their feedback is and what the salt water is doing to these systems and how they're
hmm
making it. But if you've got sail plus electric plus, a generator backup
Yeah.
plus shore
Solar.
power
Yeah.
plus solar,
Yeah.
now you've got 4 backups for propulsion.
Yeah.
So now you're at this point where, are we coming to the first time to a perpetual machine? Something that can power itself. And, you circumnavigate, without a drop of, gas or diesel.
Yeah. And then you get a water maker. So you're making your own water.
That's what I'm saying is you're all
Yeah.
self-contained. You're on your own floating kind of island.
Yep. Yep.
Again, on every one of these, it's a container, but it's full of, 1,000 things that are all progressing.
Yeah.
If you're giving it, now 3,221 days till I retire. If you give it this time, where in that cycle are you going to buy? And at what level are these 1,000 technologies going to be at? And
Yeah.
where do you spend your money? You could go buy the top end of everything, but you're going to be buying a $3 million sailboat and you don't want to do
Yeah.
that. So you're talking to all the old salts out there and
Yep.
put more money in the water maker technology. Would you put more money in solar? Where are you going to put the money
Yeah.
to get the most bang?
Yeah. And I'm sure you're going to approach it like the cars. You're going to get a great boat at a great price. So
Well, Michelle has a rule, and it's not going to be a car. It's going to have to be a brand new one. We're going to have
really,
when you have 8 years to go or 9 years to go, we can get it built and wait a year or two for it to be built.
yeah.
If it's
Wow.
built in South Africa, or if it's built in France, we
Yep.
can go pick it up.
Well, yeah, that's half the fun.
So it's one of those things is we're not in a, quick way, and I'm not going to buy, and she doesn't want to be in the middle of the ocean, 22 days away from land in somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
So she wants it to be a new, spit, shine new. That's where, your plans, need to be agreeable to.
Yes, aligned. Yes, very important. Well, I know we need to wrap this up, Jade. Just a couple more questions for you. Those tough times that you've been through, if you could go back and relive those and have those taken away, would you or would
Never.
you not want those taken away?
Never.
No, they've made you who you are.
Yeah, the title to one of my blogs, looking at my entire life, was called The Butterfly Effect.
Yeah.
And if you don't remember that movie with Ashton Kutcher, if you could go back in time and just change that one thing,
Yeah.
that one moment, or Sliding Doors, there's a bunch of movies about this
Right.
kind of the same thing. But that hit me hard though, is, changing that one, or even being a Star Trek fan, changing the time continuum by one little thing, one little whisper, one little flap of a butterfly's wings
Yeah.
can change everything. Every time Ashton Kutcher went back into the future, that one little change, changed everything. So he had to keep going back to try to, reverse that one little, and could never get it right. And that's the thing is you think about where we are now and you think about, all the things that you've been able to achieve and the things you're going to achieve, going forward. Every little thing, every problem, every challenge you ever faced and the way you got through it is what put you here. And if you were to change 1 second of that, you could be a bum on the street or that 1 second put you in front of a car or something,
Yeah.
Again, it's just one of those, you don't play with things like that.
Last question. What would you say to someone who's listening, who is in the middle of their own storm, who is in one of those tough moments right now?
First of all is compartmentalize or containerize.
Mm-hmm.
In any big project or any big problem, it's usually an overwhelming set of other things happening too. We're all in our natural cycles. We have ups, we have downs. Sometimes when you get overwhelmed is you're in a down cycle and then things just happen on any other given day. Like you have a flat tire in your car, you
Yeah.
just handle it. But when you're in a down cycle and something's bad happening in business, something's happening with your relationships, all the containers are unsealed and then you get a flat tire. It's just this, things pile.
Yeah.
What I would say is don't let them pile.
Yeah.
Handle them on their own. And if you plan for them ahead of time, if you're in a storm, you can't really do this at that time, but storms always pass. But if you can handle and start knocking down some of these containers, and again, some of them, they don't all get fixed. That relationship may not get fixed. The business
Mhm.
may not get fixed. The
Yeah.
flat tire, you may need a new car. none of, all these things may happen, but
Yeah.
understanding they're all individual things. And the only time that we feel the storm and we feel, psychological and depressed and anxiety and things always is when there's 10 things piled up. And on any other given day, many of these things could have been handled,
Yes.
but we're not in the state to handle them. And it just feels overwhelming. So that's if you can think about systems, if you can think about, containers, if you can think about these different parts of your life and keep them separate.
Yeah.
And then you can focus if it is a relationship or if it is a business or if some level of problem, you get, 90% of your focus there and, let the other things, play out like you had planned.
Yeah. And I think that's great advice, because then things don't spiral out of control. It's like, man, nothing's going right. You just get this fatalistic attitude, as opposed to what you're approaching, the way you approach it.
Yeah, and it's hard to become a system thinker. I mean, but it's just this idea of taking the emotional level
Yeah.
out of it.
Yeah.
And everything is a commodity. Everything's happened a million times before to billions of people. And just if you can kind of commoditize those things, it works.
Yeah. Jay, we're out of time, but thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun, and I appreciate the personal conversation with you.
All right. Thank you so much. Good luck.
All right. Thanks, Jay. You too.